What's up, college football fans? Snowy Valente here with the Mean Green Show, and I'm joined here today with Ty Hayes, UNT alumni and the host of the Around Table Sports. We are going to talk about UNT's recruiting class as it sits currently and a few other things. But before we get into all of that, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button because I am currently in pursuit of 100 subscribers. And I'm going to give Ty Hayes the floor so he can tell you a little bit about his YouTube channel and Around the Table Sports.
Yeah, guys, Mean Green Show, they do a great job of covering the G5 and specifically UNT. Not a lot of you're not going to go anywhere better other than the Mean Green Show for the G5 and UNT. Over at Around the Table, I focus more on Power 5 and any type of college football content, whether that's player reviews, film analysis, or general talk style videos like we're about to do it constantly. And I'd love to have y'all along for my push towards 5,000 subscribers within my first year of YouTube. So, I mean, UNT people are doing it big out here right now for sports. I don't know really what else to say other than go Mean Green.
Hey, humble flex. Absolutely. We're, Ty, I think you and I should get in a little bit of a race. You to 5,000 and me to 250. Okay. I'm willing to put $20 on it. Okay. Okay. How about that? So,
I think you're going to beat me there pretty easily.
Yeah, we'll see, man. We'll see. But well, hey, man, just kind of jumping, right into it. Once again, I do appreciate your time. I know you're a very busy guy with your channel amongst other things. And I really wanted to hear your analysis and your breakdown of, what do you think of this UNT, this Paramount 21 class? And, I don't know if you know, but I think we have two or three more spots left. So, I would like to kind of take your temperature, if you will, as far as where you think we might go with those. But kind of, as it sits, I wanted to talk about the first two in Caleb Johnson and Gabe Blair. They're two, that had a very healthy list of Power 5 offers and ultimately chose, UNT, a G5 school. Caleb was once committed to, OU.
Yeah.
And, what are your thoughts on the matter as far as, let's start off with Gabe, Denton's very own.
Yeah. So, I mean, first and foremost, anytime you can get a big recruit at offensive line, sign me up. That's something that if you ever watch my videos, I'm always yelling to the hills about the importance of an offensive line. And that's really pertinent at Denton right now and for UNT. And so especially at the center position, that's a huge grab because something I talked about today is legitimacy. And that's something that the group of 5 kind of is always in this weird dynamic with as it relates to the Power 5. And that's why you sometimes see a massive separation within group of 5 teams, right? Like this year you see Cincinnati. And it's because Cincinnati has an air of legitimacy around them that is incredibly enticing to not only recruits, but transfers. And the way you get that legitimacy is by guys just like Caleb Johnson, like Gabe Blair, and especially Gabe Blair. Right. I'm not trying to diminish Caleb Johnson because his impact is about to be felt, right, amongst all of Conference USA. They're about to see what he can do. And they say he's listed as a cornerback. I'm going to let people know right now, if they feel like throwing him in there at wide receiver, he can go in there at wide receiver.
I think he's coming to play wide receiver.
He can do anything.
Yeah.
Right. Like he is that good. His ceiling is really high. And there's a reason OU wanted him. There's a reason OU is high on him. So that's the way you get legitimacy. And I think when you look at this UNT class, there's a lot of legitimacy to be had, and there's a lot of building blocks here. And you always have to try. It always just blows my mind living in Denton, right?
Yeah.
How much talent is here that doesn't go to
Denton alone, not even Fort Worth, not even Dallas, which those are all the Metroplex that we should be grabbing from as far as G5 is concerned. But Denton alone, yes.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And I mean, geez, Louis, you just look at Denton Ryan this past year, man. And
good God.
You could build a college team with Denton Ryan today. Even when they just lost Jatavion and Billy Bowman, you could still build a college team out of Denton Ryan and Denton Geyer. So tapping into that is huge. But I mean, you really just can't underscore the importance of one being a top 100 class, right? That needs to be the bare minimum for UNT in a year is a top 100 class because that's the saturation of the market we have. And 2, getting those guys like Caleb Johnson, who right now sits as UNT's 3rd best recruit all time. And the interesting thing, I don't know if you've looked at it, but on 24/7 Sports down there, when you scroll to the bottom, they have a list of all the best recruits ever for UNT.
Yeah.
And something to be excited about is there's a lot of new names in that list.
Yeah.
Right, over the past 4 years.
Absolutely.
A lot of new guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And another one, I wanted to touch on, we're not going to talk about every single recruit. We're going to focus more on the, the top end of the class currently. And if they held, some Power Five offers and whatnot. But another one who came in late for us and wasn't even really ranked by 24/7 until, you know, until he got an offer by us and I think Southern Miss, but it is Dylan Williams. And coming out of Nacogdoches, and 24/7 jumped his rating up to a 0.8593, if I'm saying that right, and which is a big time player for not only UNT but a lot of G5 schools. And have you had a chance to check him out at all? In his film and
very lightly, but from what I saw, he's the type of rangy safety that is just huge in college football right now, right? So I did a video the other day talking about some must-gets for the University of Texas, and I put guys like Denver Harris and Bryce Anderson on there, and I was sure to clear up down in the comments that, like, even though maybe Denver Harris and Bryce Anderson aren't the biggest pieces to this UT class, that's a personal bias of mine. DBs that are super hybrid, right, and you can put them anywhere, are becoming so necessary that maybe the only place on defense more important to stopping a modern offense is pass rush.
Right.
If you don't have athletic DBs, you're in trouble, and specifically at the safety position. And he's got that rangy size, 6 foot, 180, twitchy. He's another really big get for the University of North Texas. UNT's had a good cycle, right, relative to UNT. And that's the kind of it. This is what I'm talking about, though, right? When you add in those 3 guys we just talked about, now next year someone's looking and they're like, okay, well, now those guys are going there. It gives UNT an air of legitimacy that they need to continue building upon. Right.
Agreed. Another one, Varkey's Gums. He was one of the first big time, signees, and he verbaled back in, oh gosh, I want to say August, September, and it was exciting. Still is exciting. Don't take it for granted. But at the time he was our first in the class, and now with these 2 additions, he's I think currently at 3, which is a good problem. Obviously, but he he's a specimen, man. Like he played tight end as well as D end. And what are your thoughts on somebody like Varkey's? Choosing us over. He even had an LSU offer in there, and Houston was pretty aggressive there. It came down to Houston and us, and ultimately he chose us, which, a Conference USA school over an AAC school, that's a big time win. A lot of people don't really understand that, but their conference has a lot more money than ours. So anytime we can beat out an AAC school, especially one like Houston, I feel like that's, again, a big time win.
Yeah, no, look, anytime you can beat out not only Houston, but especially like an LSU, and especially for a player like he is. And it's ironic, right, that you bring him up, because we were just talking about, or I was just talking about, how I love these new hybrid DBs, right? And the reason a lot of these new hybrid DBs came about is because of tight ends exactly like him, right, that are really athletic, that can stretch you, and that really make mismatches for the defense. It's why Kyle Pitts, out of all of the phenomenal college football players, he was one of the most, if not the most, unstoppable force in college football, because he's an instant mismatch wherever you put him on the field. Tight ends are just going to keep getting to be a bigger and bigger part of the game. And if you can take them from a team that, like LSU, that's a huge win. A huge win.
Definitely. Yeah, he's, we have some talent in the tight end room already. A few guys have kind of exceeded expectations, but his athleticism, man, is just, it's through the roof. He's built kind of like a miniature LeBron James, just his stature and everything. And, I think, where we're all kind of going in the football world is tight end is obviously, they'll always be utilized in some form of blocking, and it's always great to be able to block, but they're receivers. They're in there. They're there to catch passes and move the ball down the field as much as they are, if not more than, to help with run block and pass protection. Out of the guys couple questions. So I have a personal philosophy about whether you're Power 5, G5, whatever, about your true freshman year. And maybe you have a different mindset as it pertains to G5 or not. But I feel like whatever you do your true freshman year, again, whether it's Power 5, G5, whatever, is icing on the cake. I'm personally, as far as the players are concerned, and I talk with a lot of players that don't share my mindset, but I'm a big fan of this new play your 4 years and keep your red shirt if you can, just from the standpoint of that doesn't hurt you. It's just like, It gives you an extra year of education if you choose to stay off 4 or 5 or whatever. It gives you an extra year if you choose to take advantage of it for, exposure for the next level, and whatnot, and being able to play 4 games and still keep that red shirt. That's awesome. But that's okay. That's getting a little wordy with the red shirt, my red shirt philosophy. But my philosophy on all players, the true freshman year, as far as what we should expect. Again, this is out of high school players. I think anything they do their true freshman year is kind of icing on the cake. I don't feel like they should be coming in with oh man, we got to put Caleb Johnson better perform because we need, right out of high school, and if a program's doing that, I feel like that's not, where you want to be. This high school kid's got to come in and save the day. But what are your thoughts on people's true freshman year? Do you think it's icing on the cake? Or are you expecting, you expect more than that from certain players?
Well, I think that there's a middle ground, right? And I think that all situations aren't created equal. And I'll give you an example, right? So let's say this year at Clemson, right? Mm-hmm. Let's say DJ Uiagalelei was coming in as a freshman right now. Right. I think expectations for him are a little bit different than, let's say, oh man, who could we put? The new quarterback, whoever will be the new quarterback of, say, Texas, right? Mm-hmm. The reason is because Clemson was just in the college football playoffs. DJ Uiagalelei was rated as the second best quarterback in the nation, 6'5", breaking all sorts of records out there at St. John Bosco's. And so it's a little bit different, but for the most part, I completely agree in the sense that I really don't like when we're talking about players and people are saying, oh, well, he didn't do anything his freshman year. Yeah. That is disappointing. Right. And the only thing I can ever tell people is that's patently false. Yeah. You're a 18-year-old kid coming into a room with grown men, right?
Yes. They've been in a college program for years.
The difference is palpable.
Yes.
It's palpable, right? At one point, you're doing high school football as much as it may be for other motives, but it's for fun. Yeah. Right? It's not for fun when you get to college anymore because now you're on scholarship and it's almost like a business, right? So now it's industrialized. The growth within years is astronomical. I'll never forget when one of my really good friends from Gainesville, he went to TCU, Denzel Johnson, played safety at TCU, incredible safety, all Big 12 first team safety. The year he came back to Gainesville, and I saw him because I didn't get to see him almost any when he was involved with the program. I was just getting started in college. Yeah. So just didn't get to see each other, but he came to UNT once and saw me on his way back from TCU. He was already much bigger than me, but it looked like Denzel had eaten Denzel because he was just massive. So yeah. I think we always need to temper expectations, but with that being said, I understand if there's a fan base who has a very good situation, and let's say they're just missing a quarterback, but they just brought in a 5-star guy who is getting a great offensive line, a good running back, good receivers. I think at that point you can have some expectations as long as we always temper them that it is a freshman. Right? Like let's always have that in our mind. But with that being said, I think there are circumstances that honor more expectations as opposed to others.
I couldn't agree more. So the guys that we just broke down, in Gabe Blair, Caleb Johnson, Dylan Williams, and Varquise Gums, are higher echelon rated, true freshmen coming in. Who would you say, if you had to hedge a bet right now, who do you think comes in and makes the most impactful and potential splash in 2021 for UNT?
Ooh, that's tough. So I'm going to say Caleb Johnson. And it's because I really do believe, right? On 24/7, they say they signed him as a cornerback. But I know that in high school, he played a lot of receiver.
A little bit of a backstory. So I've heard a few things through the grapevine of why he chose UNT. So he was committed to OU. There was strictly cornerback, supposedly, right? And I've heard that he's wanted to stay a little bit closer to home, which is about an hour and a half drive from, where's he from? I'm blanking on where he's from, but it's about an hour and a half. Where?
Greenville.
Yes, Greenville. That's right. Hour and a half drive from Greenville to Denton. And we are bringing him in as a receiver.
Gotcha.
So I think he's coming to the day one. He's going to the receiver room. Not to say he'll never step foot,
Oh, for sure.
on the defensive side of the ball, but I think he's coming here to predominantly play wide receiver.
Well, then that just further reinforces
Yeah.
my pick of Caleb Johnson, right? And the simple answer of that is it's really hard to get on the field young as a center.
Right.
Because you're
Absolutely.
the quarterback of the offensive
Oh,
line.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
I think Blair can do it. He has the talent. But even for a talented guy, right? Bama just got in James Brockermeyer, the number one center in the nation.
Right.
Best case scenario, he sits a year.
Oh, yeah. If not two, and still becomes a beast.
And he'll still be a first to second round pick, right? I'm never worried about a center starting day one.
Right.
That's really tough. That's really tough. And then when we look at Williams, man, he could impact day one too. I'm not gonna lie. Dylan Williams, he could impact day one because I really like his ability to stretch the field, right? I think he can nullify a large sector of that field. But if I had to hedge a bet, it'd be either Johnson or Gums.
Yeah.
They're going to impact quickest.
Yeah.
And I think with Gums, it's just hard to keep, especially at UNT, it's going to be hard to keep a player of his ability off the field. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And he gives UNT so much flexibility, right? Like Notre Dame, I just was rewatching their the Clemson game that they won, then the one that they lost in Bama. They run a ton of 3 tight end splits, right? A ton of them. And
does Iowa State do that too? Do they do 3 tight ends?
Iowa State does a lot of 3, a lot of 2, and they're hyper effective out of it. Yeah. And so with a tight end, you can run multiple tight ends and still have positive gains in the run game and in the receiving game.
Yeah, man. I would like to, I'd pay a little bit of money to see it too. Once Caleb gets there, I'd like to see like him versus the 10 fastest on the team. Cause they say he runs a 10.5 800-meter dash, which is like,
that's blazing.
Just put him he's gonna just have him fly. You know what I mean? And like he's gonna spread the defense with that speed. So it's nothing. It's nothing nowadays, right? For a freshman to contribute on a team at receiver. The way that receiver depth is just kind of always going now, and especially at that wide receiver H, that slot receiver, man, that is a really interesting receiver position to have the skill set he does, and it's going to be really hard. But that's why when I originally thought he was playing cornerback, right? That's why I was sure to bring up like, hey, watch out, he could get reps at receiver. Right. Now that I know he's receiver, that makes sense to me, right? I think he's the guy. Okay, and I wanted to ask your opinion on this. So obviously all these guys that we mentioned, held, Power 5 offers. Some of them, multiple, and, a lot of them were bigger name Power 5s at that. Do you think we could see an uptick trend potentially in guys, saying, okay, I can go to, Oklahoma State and I can be their bottom of the barrel recruit, if you will, or I can go to, let me try to take my bias out of it. I could go to a Tulsa and be their guy. You know what I mean? Or I could go to a, even a Louisiana Tech and be the guy, or a UNT, in the Metroplex where the jobs are hopping and everything and whatever. But, do you think we could see an uptick in that? Or do you think it'll stay kind of how it is for the most part? So this is something I've been giving a lot of thought, and this might be a long answer. So strap it, right? And I have multiple little sectors for this because I've really been thinking about this for the last few days. So the first one is I think you could see an uptick this year and in the coming years, and that's because of how the NCAA is handling eligibility within college programs because of COVID, right? So in theory, right, Bryce Young at Bama, what if he says next year, I'm a true freshman? Yeah. And then what if he decides that and then stays 4 years? Now, will he? Probably not. Yeah, right. Sure. For the sake of the argument, that's a possibility. Yeah. That completely changes Bama's outlook recruiting at the quarterback position than had that not been a thing. So you're going to see more guys rated 3 stars and even some 4 stars not be recruited as heavily as their talent indicates because of this new eligibility rule. Because teams are going to be like, oh, well, we have a guy who's already here who is keeping a year of eligibility. So teams are going to be doing that a little bit different. I think because of that, in the next coming years, we could see guys who will stay more G5s,
But there's also a few problems that are going to be coming up, right? And one of
Right.
them also stems from COVID, and that's money.
Yeah.
Right. And as litigation continues to happen, and this is something I'm super intrigued about, because I think I told you I was working in law firms up until
Yeah.
I was
Yep.
just like, no, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to talk my sports.
Right.
Litigation is going to come down about the legality of paying NCAA athletes, right?
Right.
Now, whether that's name, image, likeness, all of this, but I think we can both agree that sooner rather than later, there will be a paying of the NCAA athlete, right? That's where we're
Yeah.
going.
Yeah, definitely looks that way for sure.
Absolutely. The problem with that comes in with UNT is not equally suited to pay a kid the same as TCU is.
Sure.
Right. And so when you have that happen, the incentives there are going to be something that is going to, I think, hurt the G5 unless the G5 can really get something together and have a way to pay as well. But that's a whole other conversation, because, when we talk about paying players, it has to be done by the NCAA as opposed to the institution.
Right.
Because there's no way that TCU can pay the kids the same amount UT can.
Right.
And if we're just allowing a complete free market, UT can throw around hundreds of millions of dollars and
There's
get
going to have to be some sort of salary cap, right? Yeah.
Exactly. And it has to come from the NCAA.
Right.
As opposed to the institution, because not all institutions are equally suited to provide that same salary cap, right? It's not like the NFL where everybody's making pretty much, well, at a minimum, and we go off of that. Arkansas doesn't make near what Bama makes, same thing. So that's kind of one of the issues I think that will come about.
Two names I want to drop that, if you're familiar with them, but Preston Stone and Shadur Sanders. Preston Stone, he's another one I got to see play in person, and I did a video on him. Check that out. It's pretty interesting stuff on him. But he's a player. He's a highly rated 4-star QB.
He's a game.
Had the Bama offers, and I just tee off with Bama. If you have the Bama offers, you got most of the offers, right? Yeah. And he definitely had most of the offers. Is just phenomenal quarterback, and he looks even better in person. And he chose SMU, with 4-star. I mean, great. Again, SMU is a great school. Just academically as well. And Shadur Sanders, I'm not even taking the Jackson State following his dad. We get that, but even before that, he was committed to FAU, and you have Deion Sanders as your father, and is giving you all the insights and wanting nothing but the best, and having a lot of way more know-how of the football industry than 99% of the world, right? I mean,
absolutely,
he's super plugged in. So he guided his son to a G5 school, to play quarterback. Do you? Well, I mean, I guess it's kind of piggybacking off those questions, but I mean, do you think we'll see trends like that, which is kind of the similar question as I asked you earlier, but could we also see that maybe those guys go to a G5, play a year or two, and try to transfer up to a Power 5? Or do you think that's too lengthy? If they're doing that well, they'll probably just sit at the G5 and continue to be the man and put up video game numbers and ultimately get drafted at some point.
So for the second question about transferring up, I think your kind of synopsis at the end is what's most likely. Is if you're falling out at UNT, just kind of stay there, unless you are of the mindset like we talked about. You're the number one receiver in Conference USA. You're a sophomore, but you look at LSU and you say, man, I'd like to go against Ricks and Stingley every day in practice. That's what I want. If that's what you want and you're really about it, go for it, because the 2 years that you're there, man, you're going to get better. Right? You don't not get better going up against the best corners in the nation. And LSU, man, they got them housed. Right. Now, even with that defense not looking good. The other one, and it's interesting with like the Preston Stone and Shadur Sanders. The reason why I'm still a little bit pessimistic, and I wish it would be the other way, right? I wish that it would be an uptick, but I'm pessimistic about it for one of the things that I just mentioned. The other is, as time goes on, there's a decline in the NFL draft of Group of 5 as it relates to Power 5 in the first round. Every year that goes on, the statistics of Group of 5 per Power 5 draftee goes down. So every year you're less likely to get drafted in the first round of the NFL draft unless you're playing for a Power 5 team. That hurts. And, as much as I think and I wish Stone and Sanders would be kind of the Boulder that got this thing rolling. We have to remember Ed Oliver went to Houston and he was a 5-star kid.
Yeah.
Right. So like this is something that
didn't he go third overall?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Worked
like
for him.
you can do it. And he proved that, but we never saw that uptick behind him. And if anything, it kind of stayed more the same. And I think it will stay more of the same because it's a little bit funny. Wealth in college football isn't concentrated in the group of 5. Right. Well, UNT might make a bit more money every year than they did the year before. It's not equated to your Ohio States, your Clemsons, and the money that they're stockpiling, right? They're stockpiling real money, which means, and I don't know if you've ever gotten to see it, Bama's Strength and Conditioning and Sports Science Center.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they had Jalen Waddle in a cryo chamber and then hooked up to a machine where he was doing dots like this so they could measure his reflex times.
That looked like a scene from Dragon Ball Z.
So, I mean, that's cool, right? That's awesome, right? I see that. I'm like, well, I want to do that.
Yeah, heck yeah, me too. Yeah.
It's the ability to do that. I think the last thing I'll add on this is the one way I think your group of 5 teams can really make headway, and they need to do it now, is Colorado right now, right? That's a Power 5. But at Colorado, they're embracing a sport marketing and sponsorship kind of branding that hasn't been seen in college football.
Right.
They just got into a deal with Sport Bets, which means they're allowing a gambling company to sponsor the Colorado college football games. The first time we have gambling within college football. In COVID, ingenuity is king. And here's another thing. In Illinois right now, the IMG field, Learfield people up at Illinois, the last time I heard, so don't quote me on this, but the last time I heard, they're working on a CBD partnership up in Illinois right now for a sponsorship there. The reason I bring this up is because ingenuity is king. With all these institutions losing so much capital, you have to find a way to mitigate those losses.
Right.
And it's those ingenuitive ways like sports betting, CBD, that your group of 5 teams, they need to be the teams leading that charge, because which boosters are more likely to say no to CBD, UNT or Alabama? Right. Like the Alabama boosters are probably going to be like, we're not doing that. Like we got Saban. But UNT, on the other hand, they could tell people we're on the forefront of trying to find all the best ways to care for our athletes.
Right.
That's a hell of a pitch.
Absolutely. Let me ask you that. Okay. So obviously, transfer portal, I'm looking at it every single day. It's super interesting. I'm a big fan of it. It gives us a lot to talk about. I'm going to ask you about 2 QBs. I want to know who you think made the better move in a very crowded QB room at Oklahoma, and that's Tanner Mordecai and Chandler Morris. And I'm, again, personally, I'm a big advocate of once you're going to bounce from the Power 5. I'm not saying if you go to Alabama, let's just keep it quarterback specific for this. I'm not saying if you go out of Alabama or Clemson or something, or even OU, I mean, you don't have any business going to another Power 5. We saw it in Austin Kendall. It didn't really work at West Virginia.
Jake Coker, Alabama transferred from Florida State, went to Alabama, won a national championship.
Yep, that's true. So, I mean, it works. Sometimes it works and it doesn't. But I guess I'm more of a conservative, bet kind of person. Like, hey, it didn't work. Go somewhere where you think you're going to play. And I think, with Tanner Mordecai, him going to, SMU, he's going to go there and assuming he can keep off the true freshman Preston Stone, which I think they'll lean towards the experienced hand.
And I don't think people really understand how good Mordecai is.
Oh, he's freaking good. Yeah.
Really, really.
Oh, yeah.
Because I don't think people really realize how good Spencer Rattler is.
Oh, yeah. Again, yeah. Like
I think people understand.
We're splitting hairs.
But I don't think people understand the depth of it, right? Like, I think people know, like, okay, Spencer Rattler, he's the Heisman favorite. Of course we know he's good. And Mordecai, he was the backup. So, of course he's good. It's one thing to realize they're good. It's another thing to realize how good. Mordecai is a guy who could start at a lot of other D1 Power 5 schools today.
Right.
He's a guy that goes to SMU. I think that's a great fit. I think the Mordecai one is knocked out the park.
Obviously, as UNT, graduates, we're not looking forward to whenever we play them and that. But yeah, facts are facts. So yeah, I think it's a great fit. How do you feel about the Chandler Morris move? I know he's only, he can be, with the COVID year 0, whatever you want to call it. That was year 1 for him, so he could still potentially play 4 more years. But he's going against Jeff Duggan for TCU, and Duggan's is nothing to scoff at. I mean, like, I just feel like okay, this is how I feel. You tell me if you agree or disagree, but you just went to a place where you're going to have to really, really battle, you know, and there's nothing wrong with competition, but we saw it in Jake Fromm and Justin Fields. They're not going to pull an established QB, you know, 8 out of 10 times, unless you got Tua back there and you're down in the national championship. But
you have to be special.
Yeah.
You got to be special because, and I don't think people realize this, and especially players, and there's no reason why a player should be thinking about this, right?
Sure.
Because the beauty of sports is there's so many different lenses to look at the same thing, right? Are you going to look at a lens as if you were a coach, as if you were a player, as if you were the GM, as if you were the business? There's so many different lenses to look at this through. And the reason I bring that up is because when you're a player, you're probably not thinking about the implications to the coach, right? And the implications of the university. Even though Patterson's a great coach, it's tough to go back to your people and say, we benched our starting quarterback for a new guy and it's not working out.
Yeah.
You know, like that's tough. And, you know, especially in the NFL, that'll get you kicked out. That'll get you your job lost.
Yeah.
Patterson's earned some goodwill, but regardless, you don't want to test the goodwill that's given. So I think Mordecai made the better move personally.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, you know, we may see, you know, one or both of them, you know, back in the portal at some point. You never know, as far as, you know, how college football is going. You know, one last thing, you know, before I let you go, I wanted to ask you, what are your thoughts and your opinions on a potential playoff expansion? One, are you a fan of it at all? Two, you know, where would you like it to go? And before you start, I would just kind of like to see, you know, state Alabama or Notre Dame went in, got embarrassed by Alabama. Ohio State, same thing. You know, we see it all the time in this, you know, special 1-4 world. And it's just, I guess I feel like if you would have let Cincinnati, you know, go in there, they could have got embarrassed the same way, you know, and got the national exposure, got the money, you know, that comes with coming to the, you know, college football playoffs. But what are your thoughts? Do you think we'll see it in the next 2 to 3 years? B, would you like to see it? And C, what would you like to see it expand to?
So I don't know if we'll see it within the next 2 to 3 years. I think it's an inevitability because human nature, right? Like we've got taste, we're inevitably going to want more. I do think, though, and I hate to burst people's bubble, it's not going to solve anything. Right? And if anything, we're creating a few more issues because how are we going to rework the regular season? You're already asking players who we've already agreed are playing in a business who aren't getting paid for their time in this business. And now we're saying, okay, well, now you got to go through like the SEC. Your SEC schedule went out, but now we're going to add on 2 more games to the end of that.
Right.
You look at a guy like Jalen Smith and his situation, and you could see college players being like, okay, well, you really got to pay me because any game is my last.
Right.
You had Najee Harris walked off the field at the national championship and his ankle was a grapefruit, right? His ankle was about that big around. How many more games can these guys go? Right. And one, it's the body, and we could figure that out, right? That's sure. Right now, these are easy issues to figure out. I'm just laying forth the issues. That's something we can mitigate. You take away some regular season games. Sure. And I actually think that COVID presented an interesting thing. Take away some non-conference games and go straight conference.
Right.
If you want to expand the playoffs, do that.
Right.
Straight conference into playoffs. But I don't know that it will solve anything. Right. I think we want more parity in college football. But if you look at recruiting isn't reflecting the parity people want to believe there is in college football. And a lot of people think, oh, well, you let Cincinnati into the playoffs, you let A&M in, all of a sudden you don't have this constant drudgery of Ohio State, Clemson. I hate to tell people, Clemson and Ohio State and Bama are going to continuously skull drag these people because they have more 5 stars in one unit than most people do in their entire team.
Yep.
And then they have Ryan Day, Dabo Swinney, Nick Saban, Lincoln Riley. So while I want the playoff to expand, and it will help parity, I don't mean to sound like a Debbie Downer that it won't help parity. It will help parity, but I think people are expecting for it to be a year one, like, oh, well, Bama might get beat by Cincinnati. But does that really mean that Bama's dynasty is any closer to coming to an end? Or is it just like last year? Tua got hurt. They didn't win a national championship, and they come back with arguably the greatest college football team of all time, right? The dynasty didn't get hurt by last year. So even if you expand it, if Cincinnati catches them one game, what is that doing? Because is Cincinnati going to be able to replicate that? Probably not. And if they do, that's awesome. But I just don't think that the parity in college football is as close as people want it to be. And that's a problem. And, ironically, to finish this out, I do believe that expanding is the ultimate answer. There are just a lot of easy solutions, albeit, to get there. But I think that a lot of people are going to kind of be disappointed at first until we can keep this going. Now, by that same reasoning, I think that if we kept this 4-team playoff, parity would continue to happen and we would see some evolutions, right? Like just this year, we had a legitimate argument about multiple teams, whereas most other years, it's a complete shoe-in for 3 teams and then there's maybe one debate. This year, we had 3 or 4 teams where there was a legitimate debate. So parity is slowly coming about, but I still think it's much further off than people really think it is. Right? A&M was great, right? A&M, I know that Alabama embarrassed Notre Dame and A&M thought that they should be in there. Notre Dame didn't play Alabama any worse than A&M did.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not like there was a discernible difference. What would A&M done that Notre Dame didn't or that Clemson didn't? I think at the end of the day, you're just seeing certain programs in college football do something that college football wasn't meant to achieve.
Yeah.
Right? And even Ohio State and Clemson, this stockpiling wasn't meant to happen.
Right.
That's why the scholarship limits, that's not the only reason, obviously, but there's been multiple things to try and stop what's happening from happening. But you have guys like Nick Saban who just want to outwork you.
Right.
And before we hang this up, you talked about the transfer portal, and I wanted to talk about this a little bit. Yeah, absolutely. Cincinnati, right? We look at their success. Since 2019, they've had 12 transfers.
Transfer in,
since 2019. Since that same time span, UNT has had 9.
Yeah.
Right? That's not a huge difference.
Right.
But when you look at the guys who've transferred into Cincinnati, they're definitely getting more cached guys to come in there. And I think UNT, especially last year, really paid attention to the transfer market. But that's going to be the way for a lot of these institutions to really give themselves legitimacy is through that transfer market.
Absolutely.
Because these guys are established, right?
Yeah, we saw, SMU is very aggressive in the portal as well as FAU in years past. And, I'm very, I'm hopeful that, UNT stays the course. I mean, they've been more aggressive this year. We got Jace Ruder, coming out of North Carolina. And, I'm hoping they stay the course with that and kind of keep the foot on the gas, if you will, with the portal and whatnot.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And to answer your second to last question about how many teams, I think 8, right? I think that's natural. The next natural step is just
I think you're right. Yeah. Go to 8 and then we'll all get upset and then we'll have to go to 12, I guess. But,
because that's the thing, right? Even though I do want it to happen, I think that it will help. I just worry that it won't help as quickly as people think it will. And then we're going to be clamoring about, well, now we need to go to 12 teams and 16. And then I'm like, okay, well, at the end of the day, I always use this analogy, right? And maybe it's a bad one. And maybe it's because I'm an Alabama fan, but I use this analogy because I was never a Carolina Panthers fan. Don't let the Amari jersey fool you. I'm a Vikings fan, right? I love the Raiders Amari jersey, but I always use this example. It always kind of made me laugh that year where Cam Newton went to the Super Bowl that all of these NFL players were up in arms about his dancing, right? They were always like, oh, it's so ridiculous. It's disrespectful that he dances. And I always had a very simple take about it. If you don't want him to dance, stop him. Yeah. This is a beautiful game in the sense that you get to line up and enact your will on someone else trying to do the same thing. Stop it. Did you notice he didn't dance against Von Miller? Yeah. It stopped him, right? If you want to beat Nick Saban, it's not easy. But like you see Ryan Day right now working tirelessly on the recruiting trail. It's up to people like him and Dabo and Lincoln Riley. Stop him, because you're playing by the same rules as he's playing by. Just stop him. And I understand that might be a bad take, but at the same time, I think you understand the greater message here. Absolutely. And that is that we can do a lot of things to kind of slowly help the parity, But right now we're living in an era that is just unprecedented with what Saban is doing.
Absolutely.
And I also hate that you see in the SEC coaches get booted because they can't beat Saban, right? Like Sumlin. And my whole thing is always like, okay, well, so what? He couldn't beat Saban. He beat everybody else. Like, are we really holding everybody to the standard of maybe the greatest coach of all time?
Yeah, I know.
That's a rough
crazy.
standard.
It is, but it is what it is though at the end of the day. But hey, Ty, I really appreciate your time once again, and everybody make sure to go check him out at Around the Table Sports. He does just an incredible job. And once again, if you're new to the channel here, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button for any content concerning college football recruiting, the transfer portal, and of course G5 football. All right, Ty, thanks again, man.
Yes, sir.